Hello,
Hey
everybody.
everyone, Divya just joined.
Hello. My apologies for not sending out an agenda. I had a little bit of a snafu associated with trying to figure out um, a bunch of other things that we'll talk about. So I finally did get to the point like 8 minutes ago where I could edit the running agenda and minutes documents. My apologies, I didn't send anything out. Let me just check if I heard from Shruti, if she's planning to come. If not, we can just get started with the three of us. Don't see anything. All right, so let's just get started with the three of us, and hopefully she will show soon. Okay. So, Divya, I think you've missed quite a bit, so I'll try to catch you up. So you obviously know now that this is our meeting time, no longer Thursdays. So we are canceled due to the holidays, the next three, which December 19th, December 26th, and January 2nd. So we will pick it up again on January 9th. Hopefully, everybody's calendar has managed okay with the updates, but um, we're still a little dicey around that. So please check for yourself and make sure that you've canceled these three and that you have something for the 9th. And I will try also to send out an agenda for the 9th so that everybody knows it's happening.
Yeah, I'm getting the Zoom links and the updates that you're sending out, Deb, to the calendars.
Excellent. All right. So I've had for a couple of months an outstanding AR on figuring out, since we moved to Zoom, where are the recordings going and how can we post pointers to those recordings. So I actually got a bit of information on that. So I think I somewhat know how to find the recordings. So hopefully in January, we can start to again post the recordings of the minutes should anybody who had to miss a meeting want to catch up. The other thing, we've talked about it a little bit, is that OCP is moving from this wiki concept to using GitHub. So we did in Danny's meeting on telemetry, we did have Kevin come in as a guest and we got trained up a bit on GitHub. He has not for this work stream yet set us up on GitHub, but it's on his list of groups to do. So I assume he will get to us before the next time we meet. So if you're going to edit slash even maybe add comments to documents in the future, you should get an account on GitHub. You can use one that you already have or create a new one. And I personally am debating um, whether I want to mix, my existing GitHub account with or just have one that's separate for this usage. So you kind of need to think that through for yourself. But then once we know what everybody's GitHub username is, we can inform Kevin who we would want to have write privileges.
True.
Excuse me?
Sorry, I'm so sorry, Deb. Keep going. I'm going to mute myself.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I suspect that if all you think you're going to do is read, then you can pause on getting a GitHub account, and you probably everything will be readable to the world. But if you think that you will at all be contributing anything, editing documents or PowerPoints or whatever, you should have an account on GitHub. We'll get it associated with the one for this work stream, and you should have a basic understanding of the basic Git actions and how Git is organized. And if we could, once it's set up, we could do a little show and tell here in this working group as well, if people want a refresher on how Git works. So probably the first foray we'll take into this is to, in 2024, keep our minutes and agendas on GitHub rather than Google Docs. And just one thing to just in general be aware of as we go forward is that, anything that's on GitHub, especially there's no privacy settings at all, the way Kevin is setting it up. We have to assume it's all 100% public information. So we should, and people will be training their large language models on it, et cetera. So it's just something for us to keep in mind.
I'm assuming, the OCP working group has, the leadership has thought about the implications of this, right?
I asked Kevin that, and he said, well, OCP is a public blah, blah, blah. He didn't seem to think it was a problem. I do not know how intensely they have discussed it.
Yeah.
But I do, one path we could take here would be to, put our own best estimates of, of our embodied carbon modeling, and even operational carbon modeling, right? Good rules of thumbs or best estimates, et cetera. And, if that's something we want to make public, or perhaps, keep tabs on who does and doesn't use that data and where, right? So I think that's the only place we'll need to think of it. So far, our white paper is viewable to anybody who finds it. Because it's not editable by everybody, but it is viewable by everybody. And then we just have the links here for today of where stuff is. So do we have any opens before we move on? No? Okay, excellent. So just to kind of catch us up, we've been looking for, so we have this concept of reporting for the different phases of manufacturing, reporting using greenhouse gas protocol, scope 1, scope 3, not products in use, but everything else, scope 2, location and or market, etc. So we've been looking for test cases where, and also we've been working through this concept of grading and how would grading work and how would we normalize grading, etc. So we've been just working through a lot of concepts. I've been asking for a long time, can we have test cases? Would anybody be able to share something with us? We really have not made any forward progress with that. I am asking within Intel if we can get share some information, but so far I have not gotten the okay to do so. And we haven't gotten from elsewhere either. So what I've been doing instead, I semi-randomly decided to take DDR as the starting point of interest. And I looked at the Dell. I sent the link is up here. Let me do that here. Look at the, because many people use these Dell product carbon footprints. Dell has published a lot of server product footprints. So, so I decided we could use that as one thing we could look at. Dell seems to use, not exactly clear, some mix of Paya and or Gabi when for these PCF, or there's actually the LCA reports is what it really is, but they've got the PCF encompassed in the LCAs. So that's sort of like one example that's public and we can use. And then, we don't really have the information, but if a DDR vendor were actually to, give us their product carbon footprint, I put down some assumptions for how I think that a DDR would calculate and a vendor would calculate what they would share. And then I also showed a middle road, sort of we were playing with these ideas a lot last week where actually using public information to kind of come up with a pretty good estimate of the product carbon footprint, in this case for DDR. So I will share now that just sort of three examples that I put together next to each other. And then what I thought we could kind of talk that through, and then we could kind of, say like, given that we're probably not going to get, as we originally were thinking, a breakup of the supply chain for ATM and the supply chain for wafer fab, et cetera, et cetera. Um, if we look at it, for the whole part, in this case, it's the DIM, right? If that's seems to be the most likely information that we would get. So if that's the case, then what kind of metadata would we really want to request? Obviously, what we initially spec is way more than we're ever going to see. And then also, like, how would we want to grade or distinguish these from each other? First of all, just looking at them, like, what would our gut feeling be? And then how would that grade? How could we find a way to reflect that gut feeling in a reasonable grade? So let's look at it. So what I did was the case of, because I saw it in the Dell LCA, a 60 gigabyte, I assumed it's DDR4 DIM. I actually not sure I'm not sure that DDR4, so why don't we just say DDR DIM? I'm not sure they explicitly said it was DDR4. So the rows are just sort of a description of how, and so the different methods are in B, D, and F, and then kind of I left for each one a space for us to, talk about the quality, the grading, the metadata, all of those things. So I put a description as best I understood it for each method. And then the things we've talked about is supply chain tier 2 there, supply chain tier 1. For scope 2, do we get location? Do we get market? Do we get scope 1? What do we know about external reviews, attestations, etc.? We talked before about data freshness. We've talked before, people thought we should include transportation, etc. So I put that here under upstream scope 1. And then I did for the Dell example, I cut and pasted down below just a bunch of information from their reports if we wanted to dive into it. And then also Divya kindly gave me the screenshot from Paya, so we know what Paya asks for. So is what I did as far clear as far as the columns and the rows? And can we dive into the data? Do we have any?
Yeah. So, and where's your overall score in these for the three columns?
I thought we should work on that together.
I see. Okay, got it. Okay, so
Rather
that's what you're gonna.
than rather than just my opinion. I
Yeah.
did say I think that what Dell is putting out now is the
Mhm.
lowest of the three. And my assumption is that, if a manufacturer gives it to you, it's
Mhm.
higher, the best. That being said, yeah, if the manufacturer gives it, right? Not necessarily the fabless semiconductor company, right? But if you get it from a manufacturer. And in the case of DDR, so one thing that was super interesting for me and just going and looking at DDR, it has basically collapsed into three vendors, right? And it has basically, so I think, when Paya first happened, there was a much larger plethora of vendors and, perhaps many more variables to be considered. But now it's basically three vendors. Um, so in any case, so what Dell did is they have a consultant called
So,
ThinkStep.
so
Yeah.
just one thought before you go, Deb. So, I- I think there is, and maybe that's the conclusion we'll reach, and we could have some guidance based on this. Is depending. I mean, obviously, it depends on where you are in the value chain, but the higher you go up in the value chain, the lower the quality of data, right? So Dell, as a server supplier, is procuring all of these, and so all the components from the IC vendors, the system, vendors, different part suppliers, and so we just as described in the paper, right? There are multiple layers of the supply chain that those go through before they come to a Dell, and at each step, the carbon accounting has added that layer of modeling, and which is sort of part of why this would, what Dell has and what is Dell assuming, in its PCF report, would be the lowest quality in some ways.
Yep. So I did say lowest, right? So they
Yeah.
went to a specialist consultant, right? To do it, but they, used, if you read the consultant's report, they have some pictures, some weights. They clearly use Gabi. They have some Gabi screenshots, right? They're assuming the DDR is manufactured in China. From looking at the three DDR manufacturers, that's not
That's not
strictly
true.
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 But
Yeah.
that being said, it does seem that it majority happens in Asia. Possibly Micron has some in the US, but Micron has a lot in Asia. And so in general, a high carbon intensity areas, so that could be fine. But just like Divya was describing, I did like take some statements from the consultant report where they talk about or even tables. So like this table here, you can see on the first line the DRAM. They looked at the area, they looked at the number of pieces, and the way they got it is they looked at pictures and data provided by Dell, right? They did give a screenshot from Gabby showing if you look, this PWB mixed includes the DDR as well as the other items on that little chart above. So you can kind of see, you know, based on they put some input into Gabby, and Gabby said put all that stuff together. You've got about 2.5 kilograms. For sourcing, we kind of talked about this. They think that you know, they use China, and then here's the Paya that Divya gave me, so I hope it's visible. You know, Paya asks for a DRAM capacity in gigabytes, and then just sort of where it's made, with Asia being the choice, or that maybe the default choice or the choice here. So, you know, it could very well be that Paya does something, you know, does something based on the intensity per bit. I assume that actually is what it is. I'm gonna try to find that out from a back channel. But so, like Divya said, this is, you know, this is the lowest quality, right? So I just kind of went through for tier 2, I would assume there was nothing modeled there, as well as for tier 1. And yeah, I think, you know, to me, these are valid assumptions that certainly never been disclosed, that you know, that Sphera has done a deep dive of the supply chains for ICs and has any good ideas what to, so it's probably
Yeah,
not included at
it's
all.
completely, it's not, I doubt, right? And I think they
Yep.
are very open. You know, if the consultants know that the IC they you know what they have is based on a few academic papers that were published
Mm-hmm.
back like
Mm-hmm.
2 decades back, and you know,
Exactly.
so there's really no way for them to, you know, really get a handle on the IC supply chain,
Exactly.
right? There's way too many complications around the modeling, realistically assessing, measuring. Like there's just not even an industry this thing to do that, right? So
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. And then if we move on to scope 2, it seems that using die sizes, and just like you said, Divya, some old academic papers, maybe a little bit of statistical modeling, and, you know, the assumption of carbon intensity. Oh, I did capture, you know, based on the lowest in carbon intensity in Asia that I saw to the high, it, you know, it could add 25%. That's not huge in the, you know, this overall thing, but, you know, it is a level of uncertainty. Um, so, you know, but I think that, you know, just kind of saying, X is this, Y is that, and, you know, we'll assume that it's this much electricity, and we'll assume a certain carbon intensity. Certainly, there's no way to show market based
yeah, there
scope
is no
2.
way. There's none.
So that's not there. And, you know, and that could be fine. There's some people that only want location based. They don't buy into the market concept. So for them, you know, that's not a big gap, but it is a gap. For scope 1, again, um, you know, a lot of assumptions on, just like the DDR manufacturers have windowed winnowed down, is that the right word, over the years. Likewise, the supply chain for tools has, right? The supply chain for chemicals, I think everything, there's just been a lot of consolidation. That being said, I just really don't think these papers, um, old papers, really express the modern day usage of chemicals. We know some of these chemicals have really high global warming potential. Um, you know, the modern abatement equipment for those chemicals, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah. So I think, ditto, 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 right? It's all, old data, incomplete data, very rough data. We don't know for companies like Paya, like Gabi, have they externally reviewed their semiconductor numbers and had, experts weigh in, et cetera? We just don't know. We talked about data freshness. Paya, we know, is very old. So I said Gabi assumed to be recent, but maybe that's not true, right?
You mean the tool or the data in
The
Gabi?
data.
Oh, the data in Gabi. Yeah, yeah. I mean, they have it. To my understanding is that what they have in Gabi is, whatever is available publicly, right? Which is um, these academic papers. I mean, there is a more recent 2020 academic paper which does outline tries to model this, but I don't know if Gabi has, maybe they have updated the database. Um, yeah, I don't know
We
if they have
just
updated.
don't know.
We don't know. Yeah.
Um, and then for business travel and waste, Gabi does model it. Again, how well it's modeled, we don't know. That being said, it's such a small percentage of the embodied footprint. I'm willing to give this a pass. So this, if we were to just get metadata, that explains this, I'm wondering if rather than before we said the metadata associated with the daughter card, with each IC on the daughter card, ATM of the ICs, and then wafer fab of the ICs. I'm sort of, you know, thinking that I don't know, maybe we just want to focus on the wafer fabs as the primary contributors to carbon footprint. I'm really not sure at this point what metadata we should ask, but I do think, possibly on a first order, we could just fall back to this list here for the metadata. I don't know, it's something to
Yeah,
think
even this
about.
would be a good starting point, right? I mean, yeah, getting assembly test and all that information is you're looking at, having a visibility into who your supplier is. You know, none of that is public information.
Yeah, I did look for example, I think Micron and Hynix, it was pretty clear which of their sites was wafer fab versus assembly and test, because
Okay.
the assembly and test was significantly smaller
Mm.
carbon
Mm.
footprint, which totally makes sense if you think about it. I mean, yes,
Hmm. Hmm.
there is some use of gases, but it's nowhere near the same
As a fab, yeah,
as
wafer fab.
as a fab. And yes, there is some use of electricity, but again, it's just nowhere near. So, yeah, yeah. So I don't know. To me, that was sort of a good outcome of trying to do these examples, was to say, yeah, we're, trying to break it up to the level that we had is probably too much. What I was thinking was for the fabless semiconductor companies, how are we going to try to figure out, right? Where they outsource the assembly and test, they outsource the wafer fab, right? But yeah, we're going to have to figure out some methodology for that or grading for that or something. But when it comes to DDR, SSDs, HDDs, I think that that's less of a concern. So in a way, I'm glad I took this as the use case because it's just simpler. All right, so if we look all the way over to when the manufacturer gives the product carbon footprint, I'm making an assumption here of how I would think the manufacturer is doing it. But it is an assumption. So my assumption is that the corporation already does its annual accounting for the CDP, for the CSR reports, for, soon will be for TFCD, and soon will be for the California law, which I don't remember, and soon will be for the US SEC, et cetera, et cetera. So I assume that they do figure out their annual thing, and then they have some methodology to proportion their scope 1, 2, and 3 to a product, right? And we'll assume they know way more about their manufacturing and their products than we know. So their methodology for divvying up their annual down to one instance of one product, assume it is extremely rational, right? So I do not think they do tier 2 supply chain, though. I think that my assessment of state of the art is that everybody's using CDP to get their tier 1 supply chains, and that, they don't have a business relationship with their tier 2. So it's, they're just working on tier 1. So basically, it's the same answer for many of these rows. It does seem to me, based on looking at a few of these CSR reports, is that most of them are not giving location on a per part way, although like we looked at last time, you can infer it from because for their whole company, they report scope 2 market and location. But they obviously prefer, they've made investments in market, therefore, when they give their product carbon footprint, they would want to show those investments. So they would perhaps not share a location-based PCF, but would do a market one. Scope 1, again, divvying down the annual numbers. All of this stuff is usually attested, reviewed, etc., just because it is annual filings to regulatory or semi-regulatory bodies. It's, you have to go and show them your methodology and what you measured, where, how, when, etc. So I do think that, companies have pretty good data, and they have a lot of reasons not to lie, right? I would say that data freshness, I didn't fill it out, but it is annual. That's pretty good. And then again, if you want business travel or whatever, they all seem to report on those aspects of scope 3. So I would say this really, this is the best. The problem that we're trying to focus on is not everybody is large enough to have that relationship with the DDR manufacturers. They don't buy enough volume, et cetera, to get these numbers. So So in the middle is just sort of what I was toying with, just, it's for fun. Maybe we'll decide to pursue it further, maybe not. I think that'll be discussion for another day. But assuming there are consultants that understand this industry well enough, either they worked there or they studied it, et cetera, and they use public information. Um, and so what we've seen is that also in some of the CSR reports and some of the CDP reports, they give metrics like carbon per gigabyte or carbon per terabyte or carbon per terabit or you know some metrics of intensity. So those pieces of information are all out there and they can be pieced together. Um, so, what would somebody using that methodology be able to pull off? So again, I think that tier 2 is not there. Over time, perhaps somebody could model that um, it, to some degree or another. But I think
But it's
for the
not needed
most,
in this case, right? In this case, it's not really needed if you're
well, a
getting.
lot of people want to go from cradle to gate, right? So if you're
Hmm.
talking cradle,
Hmm.
you want to go all the way back to, you know, the chemicals themselves or the creation of the blank wafers, right? That's
E-
an energy intensive activity, et cetera, right? So
Yeah, so but presumably, like when you're getting a CO2 GB per GB, it's already accounted for all of for all the chemicals.
no, well,
No.
it's accounted for the the first tier of the supply chain, right?
Yes.
But
Yes.
if the intensity happened one or two steps back in the supply chain, that's lost, right? And that's what we were hoping to um, capture in this tier 2, um, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Okay. Got
I
it.
mean,
Okay, then that
it
makes sense.
could be, again, if somebody, be it us or somebody else, goes and really studies this, and it's like, yeah, there's a small number of chemical um, manufacturers, most of the raw materials are not carbon intensive together. It's the refining and right, I'm guessing, I really don't know, Divya, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but somebody could go through and kind of by first order for the major contributors say tier 1 is enough, or no, we really should model tier 2. I worked with a consultant from academia that does, as far as I can tell, all of the embodied carbon for a very large hyperscaler. And that person has a model that kind of goes deeper into the supply chain with a
Mhm.
lot of EEIO
Okay. Okay.
concept. Well, they do EEIO cross product with their own special methodology, yada, yada. But to me, a big gap in what that person was doing was that they just were making assumptions on the geographies where things were happening. Um, and just because,
Yeah.
your ATM was in Vietnam does
Yeah.
not mean your chemicals were created in
Right.
Vietnam,
Right.
right?
Right. Right.
So, but they're, blah, 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 right? So
Yeah.
for the future, it might be a good thing, but I just don't think anybody other
Yeah.
than this one consultant has
Yeah, I
even
think
attempted this.
your what you're pointing to, Deb, is the elephant in the room, if you will, is that any consultant outside the industry has no idea how complicated the supply chain is and how the whole movement of materials, goods, chemicals, uh, from there is absolutely no way for anyone outside to capture that.
Yeah, I did spend many hours with this individual. And it was part of why I drew those pictures in our white
Yeah,
paper,
yeah.
tried to talk about it a little bit, because then if I ever ran into a second person trying to do the same thing, I'd say, well, first read this white
Right,
paper
this white paper
and
before you
then
spend.
we can talk, right?
Yep.
So, all right. But so, tier one, so just going quickly, I do think that based on public data, with my looking at it, um, you probably could get a decent estimate um, on, per gigabyte metric um, for tier one, for scope two location and market, for scope one. The raw data is of high quality, like we talked about. And then the consultant, may or may not need to get their work reviewed, or some, attestation on it, etc.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
data freshness, I would say, this could be provided annually or every other year is probably sufficient, right? Um, and then the other stuff um, is available to, a consult. So part of what I'm saying is, from when Paya and Gabby were created, corporation disclosure has increased phenomenally, and somebody could use that to model as well, right? So if we had these three things in front of us, um, how would we want to grade them? How would we want to, you know, with you know, a simple, or, kind of disclose to people the quality, right? The completeness, the, um, etc.
Yeah, I mean, you have given in the white paper, you have given, the grading criterias, right?
Well,
And
again, I thought those grading criterias would be for ATM, wafer fab and daughter cut, right?
yeah,
So do we, if we were to, at least in the case of DDR, just kind of collapse them, we could go and look at this. But, just kind of a gut feel, right? I want, for this, I would want to say, I would want something that would be clear to somebody from first glance that, this is the lowest, right? This is of lower quality, not of zero use,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But of lower quality. This is of best. You know, I happen to think the middle one would be pretty good, but it is somewhere in the middle, right?
Yeah, yeah, because obviously, you're dependent upon your relationship with your suppliers and whatnot on the rightmost column, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so not every company is capable of having that relationship. So you have so yeah, middle one definitely seems like the best one, if of what you can outsource, what you can source out of these.
Well, so I did look for Micron and SK Hynix, and I tried to. Samsung has a separate part for Samsung Electronics, but it does include displays and other things. They all have CDP reports, and they're all um, working their supply chain through CDP. So, so I do the thing, like I said, the industry is consolidated so much, and the regulatory requirements have increased, that, yeah, I think this all kind of comes together to, first of all, if somebody were to do D, work along, do something along the lines of D, I think it would be, pretty high quality. And if there were a way we could grade that to show that. And then, also to show that corporations reporting, they're not, for regulatory reasons, et cetera. These are big companies. They really can't mess around. I mean, it would be probably not wise of them to be messing around, at least. So
Yeah, I mean the difficulty would be, for some for a to a consultant to do in doing this out of the CDP reports is actually, well, they might be able to do CDP per dollar unit or something like that, but not the per.
well, several of the reports do give up per megabit or
Okay,
terabyte
okay,
or
I see.
something intensity. Um, I did for Intel, I did it on a dollar basis. And I will report it had the right number of digits. So relative to what we think it is internally. So I actually
Okay.
thought that was pretty amazing.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So, okay. So you kind of took this approach and actually tried test it. Okay. So this does work.
Well, I mean, again, or somebody else comes up with something else that's amazing.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
But I would like to have, because many people do not have access to method 3, right?
Yes. Yes.
Right? You're not a
That's
big
right.
enough
Yeah.
purchaser, right? And method 1 costs money as well. And people, like I said, they just look at, oh, Dell did this. Yep, here's the embodied carbon of a server done, right?
Yeah.
They don't even, they don't even question it. So it would be good to, kind of let them know the quality of that data is, not the best, better than nothing, perhaps, but not the best. And, there is a space in the middle. And if anybody fills that lane in the middle, I'd like the grading to give them, credit, right? To show the value of that work. And yeah, yeah.
Yeah, right. I mean, because remember, for us, a server user of a Dell server, the assembly test, wafer fabs, all of these are like second tier, third tier suppliers, right? So, so again, right, let's look at it from the stakeholder point of view, right? For them, even getting a Dell LCA, which is the first order supplier, right, is maybe maybe good. Yeah, I mean, as OCP, because we span the spectrum of suppliers, vendors, ecosystem partners, this approach makes sense, right? But for a user of a Dell server, um, they are relying on a Dell as a system supplier, a server maker, and from their lens, it might be good enough. But from an OCP lens, we are making through this exercise, we are saying, hey, user enterprise, you're using the Dell server, but the quality of data is this great based on this analysis that we have done.
A lot of people are operating in the cloud and they're just using the LCAs from Dell for
Yeah.
their embodied,
Yes.
right? So,
That's right.
and Dell did not,
That's right.
they don't even seem to be, stop and think, is this the right amount of memory relative to
Yeah,
what I'm renting at AWS? Never mind that Delta
right.
didn't make it, right?
Yep. Yep.
So it's just like, because it's public, it's
Yep.
been used
It's the best.
pervasively.
That's right.
But I do, it's quite possible that we could decide that, our work stream could publish some, you know, taking the D methodology or the F methodology, if we can find people that want to work with us, slash, some information from Paya, I don't know. Um, we could also publish information, right? That on first order, you know, if you're renting, you
Yeah, I mean,
know,
the thing is, OCP's spectrum of members spans, right? It's like, all the way from enterprises to hyperscalers and everyone
exactly,
else in between, right? So there might be some who are in that position to go with column F. There will be
right,
some who will only be able to do
absolutely,
column B, and some who will be able to do column D.
right. And again, the customers of the people that get F don't get the F information,
Right,
right?
right.
Right? When you go to rent
Yeah,
from Google Cloud or AWS, right? You just,
don't have that.
you don't
Yeah,
know. And so people just pick one of the random ones from Dell because it exists, right? It's
yeah.
publicly available. So what I'm saying is that we could say, maybe one of our goals is to give kind of better
Oh,
um,
I see.
embodied
Uh-huh.
carbons for a server, um, you know, that's more, more modern, more what have you, right?
Yeah, but that depends on, what the working group is able to drive in terms of ecosystem partners providing
Exactly,
these data through different databases and whatnot.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. Our hope was that people would be putting more information in databases that we could
right,
access, right? That's what's in the white
right,
paper, is that
right.
we would have a software layer that would have
Yes,
access to different databases. That does
yes.
not seem to be playing out at all,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
Um, so
yeah.
I'm kind of wondering, right? Maybe we could do some general good enough modeling, and,
Hmm.
as the first answers that
Yeah,
people could get out of the database, right? Out of a database or not, right? Maybe we
yeah,
don't, but um, we just say, here's, what we listed out in A is what this is the metadata we'd like to see, at a minimum focused on the wafer fab and anything you can add about ATM, et cetera, right? And then, go do that adding up of all the parts on the motherboard, and come to a full number.
yeah.
Um, we may find we're not that far different than the LCAs at Dell,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I would like to kind of know that. Um, I think that would be interesting. In any case,
yeah.
but I do, you know, maybe we can think about it over the break, but, is there a way to, kind of like, you know, to kind of just, for a grade well, we grade's lowest, but for a grade that lists the, you know, biggest gaps, um, in the information or something like that, and and then says something about quality, like lowest, right? So would we do like 1 to 10, and we would say this is roughly at a 2, right? The middle one is a 6, and the right hand one is an 8, right? Leaving ourselves room to improve over time. um Or, I think the next thing that would be good for a grading comparison, once we kind of have this nailed down, then we can do something like a GPU with HBM, or like we have Sapphire Rapids with HBM, something that's kind of more heterogeneous inside, and kind of see if how that would be graded, and how that would look, and that might help to steer us more on the grading as well. All right. Well, thanks for your feedback, Divya. It was good discussion.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't have a lot to add. It'd be interesting sometime to see the pie chart of in the carbon model.
Like when you roll up to the whole motherboard, or?
Yeah, rolling up to something, whether it's a server or a motherboard, because I think at some point we'll
That
we'll have to weigh carbon impact by component.
Yeah, those pie charts are there in that. If you opened the
Are they?
Dell
Okay.
LCA, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
we've talked ad nauseum about why their data is questionable, but
Yeah. You see
that
this?
being said, here
Yeah.
they say, right, I mean,
They have the production, they have the full life cycle, they have several pie charts in this report.
Right.
Okay, I'll take a look at it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
we have them in our reports as well.
Okay. Yeah. Ari, by the way, this is like their Gabi based model, right? And on their Dell's website, you'll see several of these pie charts, which are not the full life cycle analysis, but based on the PIA's simplistic model of life cycle analysis. Dell has it. All the 3 server big ones, OEMs have it.
Oh yeah.
and just so that you know, it took me a long time of reading through this. PWB mixed includes the DDR, and main board includes the CPUs.
Yes.
So their terminology is interesting, to say the least. But they do, just to, I'm not seeing it here. It's probably in some of the others. They do show end of life. They do show assumptions for product and use.
Yeah.
Etc.
And they describe how they came to that product use model. And by the way, I think that's the piece I thought we need to tackle for the next year for this working group, right?
Well, first we have to get through embodied, but yes, we are going to talk about products in use as well.
Yeah. Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.